Hi, this is Akshay Sura from Konobos. Today we'll be talking about workflows. Workflows are a way for us to keep track of content and the states they're currently in. Ideally, we want to start off with draft and we want to end up in a published state. That's when the piece of content goes live so our end users can access it. Of course, there are several reasons why the workflow state can end up in draft or end up in archived, but the ultimate goal is to get it published. So in content, workflow is pretty simple. By default, you get access to a default workflow. You could create as many new workflows as you like. As part of the workflow, you specify which content item the workflow is applicable for. As well as the steps. So a visual representation of this would be really useful, but I'll try to walk you through it just to kind of get an example or an idea of how it's set up. Now in here, basically we're defining the draft workflow. So if I modify the name, you can see that everything changes. It's just kind of indicating that's what it's talking about. These are not hard-coded. So in a draft workflow, you specify a color, whatever symbolizes the specific workflow. What this is trying to show you is what other steps come back to draft. So in the current case, what we are saying is when you're in review, you could come back to draft. It doesn't necessarily mean in review the only step you can come back to is draft. Currently, because we are looking at draft, it's basically saying one of the step, which is review, can come back to a draft state. The second one, which is draft transitions to, it's basically trying to say is while you're in draft, you can either go to review or you can go to archived. That's basically what it's trying to show you. Also, here it kind of shows you which roles this particular workflow step belongs to. So it becomes a little bit easier once you set up more and more, but I'll walk you through one more. So review, we picked a different color by default. What we're trying to say is while you're in draft or an SEO verification state, you can come back to review. And while you're in review, you can go to draft, SEO verification, published, or archived. And again, we are specifying that all roles have access to it. What we can do, because we set up an SEO role, is in this case, we're saying from an SEO verification perspective, and this is a sample project, the steps review and ready for approval can come back to SEO verification. If you're in an SEO verifications workflow state, you could go to review, ready for approval, or archived. You will notice that archived is pretty much open on any workflow step, because at any point in time you want to abandon it, you could archive the piece of content. In this case, it shows that all roles can do it, but what we want to do is we want to only set it for the SEO. This is the role we had created in the previous video. Only users who are in the SEO role, we would want them to verify the SEO of the specific item. So you could do that. You could specify the one or many roles. So in this case, I could give multiple roles access, but it's totally up to you what you want it to do and so on and so forth. The end goal is that for us to get into a final published state, and that is basically what we need it to be. Once you're in a published state, you could archive it. You could also unpublish and then go back to a previous state. There's several things you could do once in a published state, but essentially this sets up your workflow. It also means you could set up different workflows. So for instance, in this case, instead of saying all content types, you could just say coffee or coffee and a grinder. And maybe you want to run these through a different set of workflow steps. Maybe it involves a different role or roles, which are, they are the people responsible for the product related information or product marketing or legal and things like that. So workflows help us to route our content to different states. Ultimately, the goal is to get published into the different channels that we're trying to publish. I hope this was helpful. Thanks again for joining us.